I want to share with you guys how I really started dreaming about having a church that believed, practiced, and trained for all the gifts of the Holy Spirit. And it started all the way back when I was 17 and I first gave my heart to Christ. I went into the church and I was totally freaked out. First of all, there was a worship band on the stage. That was new to me. But what really freaked me out is because I kind of walked in while worship was already going. Because if you're an unbeliever, you don't want to come to church early and have people actually talk to you. But I heard people just literally screaming in tongues. I didn't know what it was. Screaming in tongues at the top of their lungs during the worship. And so all this craziness is going on and I'm freaking out. I don't know of a better phrase to use than freak out. That's what it was. But as many of you have heard before, I experienced the Holy Spirit. It's like He just caused me to overlook that, and I was so overwhelmed by the presence of God, I could just overlook all the lunacy that was going on around me. Well, after I got saved, there were a lot of good things that church did for me, but there was one spiritual gift that they really, really, really wanted me to have. They really wanted me to scream at the top of my lungs in tongues during worship, because then I would have power in my spiritual life. And so they prayed and they tried to convince me in all of this about the gift of tongues, and I tried and I couldn't do it. I couldn't speak in tongues. And I just noticed, at least in retrospect, that of all the spiritual gifts, I started to read my New Testament that year of my salvation. There were all these spiritual gifts listed in the Bible, but there was one that they emphasized. So I went to college, and I went to a church that actually didn't believe in the gifts of the Holy Spirit, and I kind of went through a stage where I thought, yeah, maybe that was a bunch of hogwash. I don't know. Didn't know what I thought about the gifts of the Holy Spirit, but I was kind of content in this environment that was a lot more sane. And they did practice one spiritual gift especially also. It wasn't the gift of tongues, and they really pushed this upon us, and it was the gift of evangelism. And they pushed it, and they pushed it, and they pushed it, and I made close friends in that church, and I lost close friends who went to other churches because they just couldn't handle the evangel pressure. It was too much. These two experiences, when I looked back upon a church that was unbalanced in the spiritual gifts, gave me this hunger to see the gifts of the Holy Spirit practiced and trained for and pursued. A couple weeks ago, I offered an analogy, and it was based off of 1 Peter 4:10. 1 Peter 4:10, Peter tells us that each one should use whatever spiritual gift he has received. We've all received a spiritual gift from God. He says we should each use it. Are you using your spiritual gift right now? Do you know what your spiritual gift is? And he says, because when we do this, we display the manifold grace of God. That verse just makes me want to say Selah. You know, like when you read in the Psalms, Selah. God's grace is manifold. It's varied. It's multidimensional. It's not just one-dimensional. And so I use this analogy of a prism. And I showed a picture. I put it up on the screen. It's probably on your screen right now. And it was a picture of a beam of light that was coming into the prism. And I said, when the world looks at the grace of God, at best they see it as one-dimensional. Usually, just like when we're looking around, we don't normally see beams of light. We see the effects of the light, that it illuminates the objects that we're looking at. But at best, so sometimes when the sun is peeking out from a cloud, you can see a beam. When the world outside of the church is observing the grace of God that's right in their very midst, at best they see it as one-dimensional, like that beam of light. That beam of light represents the grace of God. When it hits the prism, all of a sudden we see that the light is refracted, and we can see all the colors of the rainbow. Do you know what they are? I do, because I've memorized this little acronym, Roy G. Biv. It stands for red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. Did you know that all the colors of the rainbow exist within the beam of light before it's ever refracted? When it hits the prism and the light is refracted, all of a sudden it becomes evident what's inside that apparently one-dimensional beam of light from the very beginning. That beam of light is God's grace. The prism represents the church that's fully engaged in employing the gifts of the Holy Spirit. When the church is fully engaged in employing the gifts of the Holy Spirit, all of a sudden, God's grace does not just appear one-dimensional. God's grace appears to the world as multidimensional, as manifold. I do not believe that we can be an adequate witness to the world unless we are displaying the Roy G. Biv of the glorious grace of God by using our spiritual gifts. The thing I shared after that sermon was I made a push to come to a what we were calling a care team lunch, because we were launching care teams the following Sunday, and we plan to have care team meetings, Lord willing, until He returns. And here's what a care team is. It's what we used to call ministry teams. We divided up into 7 care teams to encompass all the spiritual gifts. Now, there's a lot more spiritual gifts than just 7 spiritual gifts, but some of these encompass multiple ones. For instance, we have a prayer ministry. I would say prayer is probably the biblical spiritual gift of faith mixed with the biblical spiritual gift of mercy, because the person praying has a heart for the people that he or she is praying for. The prayer ministry has for a long time been faithfully led by Don Martin. But from the very beginning, when Dawn and I were talking about this prayer ministry, we talked about how ultimately her goal was to get it started and to pass it on to somebody else so she could devote her energies to children's ministry. Well, we found that person. His name's John Giddens, and John Giddens has a heart for prayer. That guy is as much of a man of prayer as anyone I know. And he knows how to two-step. That's not really going to help in the prayer ministry, but I'm just saying, he knows how. So John Giddens leads our prayer ministry. We have 7 of these ministries, and I don't expect you to remember all these 7, and you don't have to, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But first, we've got the prayer ministry led by John Giddens. We have the service ministry, which is led by Glenn Campbell, who's our head deacon. Many people are gifted in serving others. It's where they find their joy and their passion, just doing menial things. Glenn is very gifted in this himself. He's our head deacon. Our deacons and deaconesses are on this team along with a number of other people with the gift of service. We have a prophetic team led by Matthew Merritt. We have a healing team led by Paul Hart, which also includes an inner healing dimension to it. We have an outreach team led by one of our elders, Joe Weeks. Our worship team, what you see every Sunday, is led by Jamie Kirby. Jamie has a passion for, he's been involved in a lot of training of people and using musical instruments. He's well trained on pretty much all the musical instruments, and he's going to be training every week in worship ministry. We also have pastoral ministry. That's led by another one of our elders, actually an elder in training, Kyle Roberts. And here's what I mean by pastoral ministry. There's a misconception, I think, that people have that that pastors are only people that are paid by churches. I want to shatter that misconception. We see all of our Connect group leaders really as pastors. I ask myself as the pastor of this church, how can I possibly pastor a couple hundred people? How can I shepherd them? And the answer is there's no way that I can do it by myself. And so we've been raising up Connect group leaders, and these Connect group leaders have shepherding responsibility over their different groups. And the same goes for our women's ministry, men's ministry, youth, and children. These all fall under pastoral because pastoral oversight is taking place in each of these. So we have these 7 ministries, and here's why you don't have to remember all those. All you have to do is come at 10 a.m. on Sunday mornings, every Sunday morning except Easter, 10 a.m. on Sunday mornings, come to the fellowship hall, and all the ministries will be spread throughout the fellowship hall. And we're looking at this April, maybe even beginning of May timeframe as a time for you to explore. You do not have to commit to a ministry at this point. We are not going to make you sign in blood. We're not going to do it. We want you to explore. When I discovered that I had a prophetic gift, it wasn't because I signed my name on a dotted line. It was because I just tried it out. We want you to visit the prophetic ministry if you're interested in that one week, and the next week visit the healing ministry if you're interested in that, and find where you gel. Find where you gel, and where you gel and where you feel that you're spiritually gifted. Then down the road, you can become a devoted member of that team and find your joy in using your spiritual gifts. And that's what a gift is all about. I mean, we should find joy. When I opened my presents on Christmas morning when I was a kid, when I opened those gifts, it brought me great joy. And there's a reason God calls these spiritual gifts. They give us joy when we use them. Only with the Bible, unlike Christmas, our gifts, our spiritual gifts are meant to be given away. And so I would ask you, what is your spiritual gift? Do you know what it is? Are you using it? Well, come find out at 10 a.m., except Easter, on Sunday mornings. And if you're in worship, then Jamie will have you in the worship center at 10 a.m. also. But please, please, please come to this. It's a big part of what we're doing.